This week the anime tried to pull an Attack on Titan bit of animation with Luffy taking down number 5, which I really appreciated. In the episode, Hyogoro says that Luffy looks like the fire god, and I'm like, that's interesting. Does he mean you-know-who? It'd be interesting to find out if Hyogoro knows anything about Nika, because he looks like his hair is on fire sometimes as well. Apparently, the updated version of We Are was a 1K episode exclusive, because they changed the opening back to Dream Anon, and from what I understand, we should be getting a brand new opening soon at some point. Also, the episode made it pretty obvious that the 1% man, or the guy who had like 99% chance of dying, according to Hawkins, was actually X-Drake. And so this is one of the occasions where like the anime actually clarifies things further that the manga wasn't really clear on. So yeah, it turns out that it's Drake. Also, shout out to Jinbei being foreshadowed as having Conqueror's Haki. I'm just kidding. I'm not sure if that's true or not. They just ended up using the same sound effect and sort of visual framing than when Roger used it against Whitebeard. But anyway, speaking of Conqueror's Haki, it's this week's chapter, 1033. Alright, so this week, Oda decides to give us a cover page that honestly looks like it could have taken place in Punk Hazard. We have Smoker in the background there looking bitter, as always. You got some penguins there. Again, Punk Hazard feels. And what's interesting is that Oda decided to go with a Tashigi request for this chapter. Specifically this chapter, which mainly revolves around Zoro's past. And so him drawing this for this chapter just makes me think that he intentionally wanted to evoke the Kuina and Tashigi resemblance. We start off with Zoro taking control over Enma, which is something that he's done before in the past, so it's not a big surprise. That's just how the sword works. It absorbs the user's haki, and it's up to the user to make it behave. We go to the Sanji section of this chapter, and we see that Hell Memories was not only strong enough to send Queen flying through several layers of the building, but also the top of Queen's head is on fire, which I found funny. We get a shot of Sanji's eyebrow in this, and we see that it's still swirling in the counterclockwise direction, exactly like his siblings. And so I got a comment about this in my review for chapter 1031 that said, I wonder what it would look like if we could see both of Sanji's eyebrows at the same time. Like, would his pattern look like this to match the eyebrow that's visible, or would it be half and half? Like, is his secret eyebrow still spinning in the direction that it was normally? Queen then gives us a little bit of lore regarding Lunarians by stating that King is a monster that can survive in any kind of environment. And so with that comment, I'm automatically reminded of all the very durable things that exist in the One Piece world, right? So I'm thinking about black blades that are durable, poneglyphs that are indestructible. I'm thinking about the red line. And I'm also thinking about Treasure Tree Adam as well. All these things, in some way or another, connect to the ancient past. And speaking of poneglyphs, in Skypiea, Pagaya says that sea stone contains a special compound called Pyrobloin. And so obviously we know that the word pyro comes from fire. And so Pagaya says that if this compound, if the Pyrobloin mixes with moisture, it can create the island clouds or the sea clouds that we see in the world of One Piece. Now, according to Pagaya, the reason for why the Pyrobloin reaches the sky in the first place is because it gets sent into the sky via volcanic eruptions. And since we know that sea stone has Pyrobloin in it, and we know that sea stone originated in Wano, and we also know that the Kozuki clan created the Poneglyphs, now I'm thinking that maybe both the Poneglyphs and sea stone contain Pyrobloin. And that maybe the difference between creating a poneglyph and sea stone has to do with the amount of moisture that gets mixed into the Pyrobloin. So sea stone would have to have more moisture in it, specifically moisture from the sea, because sea stone is supposed to have the energy of the sea in it. Also, since we know that Pyrobloin comes from volcanoes, I'm wondering if Mount Fuji is actually maybe an inactive volcano, and maybe that was the volcano that the Kozuki clan used to create the poneglyphs. And speaking of volcanic eruptions, Zoro stabs King in the stomach, and it seems like this causes King to automatically explode. Of course, we later find out that Zoro protected himself, just like Apu did in the previous chapter, by using Armament Haki. And then also Queen's comment brings up another point, which is that whoever exterminated King's race must have been powerful enough to be able to bypass the durability of the Lunarian race. So they must have been crazy powerful to win against King's race. I mean, just imagine an army of kings. The durability of that army would be disgusting. So just imagine how much more powerful the other side was, or is. One of the translations of the chapter had the moment where Sanji asks Queen about the Lunarians. Like, the translation had Queen saying something like, that's something that you'll have to figure out for yourself. And I'm like, that's kind of funny because it makes Queen sound like he's self-aware that he's going to get defeated by Sanji. It kind of felt like Queen was saying, you'll have to figure that one out after you defeat me, because we all know you will. But no, in the official he just says, go ask a history book, which I'm guessing is code for You'll find that out once you read the Poneglyphs. Also, going back to the volcano thing, if it turns out that Luffy is connected to Lunarians, or if he has like some kind of Lunarian blood in him, like maybe his mom was a Lunarian, if he has that durability feature that King is showing in this chapter, then that durability is going to be incredibly important and crucial in his fight against Akainu. We go back to Zoro to see him use Itoryuya Shisunsun. Now this is actually a stronger version of Zoro's normal Shisunsun, which all you do is you add a shi at the beginning of it, so it's like Shisunsun. So he adds the death before the lion song, so it's a stronger version of Shisunsun. Now what's interesting is that if you look at the cut on King's face, right, it seems like it's on fire. And so the question here is the fire because of the Zoro cut, or is it because King is healing himself with his fire? Unfortunately, because Zoro thinks that he didn't do anything to King, Enma starts reacting again. And so this supports what I said in my last review, which is that the sword seems to react when it feels that Zoro has lost focus. And so because of that distraction, King's Imperial Deep Pride Stake actually does manage to hit Zoro this time, and the attack is so severe that it not only wounds him on the side, but Zoro actually lets go of his swords. And so we get a sequence of him trying to recapture the swords, while at the same time thinking about the history of each of them individually. Also, just based on the flashbacks, you can tell that out of the 3 swords, Zoro has the least amount of emotional attachment invested in the Sandai Kitetsu. Like the other 2 swords, they get really substantial flashbacks that explain why they're important, but when it comes to Sandai, all we have is Ippon Matsu saying, "Be careful, it's cursed!" So if Zoro were to lose that sword, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Now, I strongly suspect that the reason for why we're getting a Sandai Kitetsu flashback right now is so that we're reminded about the emotional attachment that Zoro has to the sword, so that we actually feel something whenever it is that King actually breaks the sword and Zoro has to replace it. Because really, like, what is the point of showing us the Nidai Kitetsu, which is a superior version to the Sandai Kitetsu in this arc, if Zoro is never going to get to use it? We're also getting closer to the Flower Capital, which is where Hitetsu is, and he knows a lot about the Kitetsu series that he hasn't revealed yet. So anyway, King notices that Zoro is having a flashback, and he uses like a Sanji kick, Diabrujamba, to kick him on the face and send him through some rocks. And Zoro even comments on the kick's temperature. He says that kick was hot, so you kind of have like the grill sort of effect on Zoro's skin, and you have like some smoke coming out of him as well. So yeah, that kick just reminded me of Diabrujamba. We move on to get the flashback of the Wado Ichimonji, which is the Sword of the Promise, and we get reminded that both Enma and the Wado Ichimonji were crafted by the same legendary swordsmith, which we get to meet in this chapter. Physically, we get to see his design. So King goes into his hybrid form, and I've noticed this before, that when he goes into hybrid, the flames on his back seem to disappear. They seem to go away. And so he shoots down an attack, and I think that he was trying to hit Zoro, but he was also trying to hit Enma as well. So Zoro protects Enma from the attack, and he seems to be able to pull the sword out of the ground just in time to try to block King's wing. Unfortunately, because King is in his strongest form, he's in hybrid, the attack from his wing is enough to crush the ground open, and it actually ends up sending Zoro down to the basement floor of Onigashima, which coincidentally is the place where Yamato is headed along with Fuga. So it seems like Yamato's gonna meet Zoro, and so I'm pretty sure that Yamato's gonna be like, yeah, you look a lot like Ushimaru, dude. Like, you should look into that. And so if the Attack on Titan theory about the samurai being turned into numbers in Punk Hazard is actually true, then that also means that Zoro is about to learn something pretty upsetting about what happened to his father. Also, the whole point of Yamato going to the basement is to stop an explosion from happening. And King is there now, and not only does he use fire to fight, but he can also explode and take no damage. So King being in the basement automatically increases the tension, because it puts Zoro and Yamato in a very tight spot, and so I'm wondering if Zoro's going to have to be cutting explosions left and right, or how they're going to do it so that King doesn't blow up the basement. We get a flashback of Zoro and Momonosuke training, which happens after Okiku told Momo not to say the word Tsunachi, and I like how Oda tries to justify why Zoro has never used the word himself. It's because he didn't like it. But now I'm thinking that maybe Zoro will use the word at some point during this fight, you know? Because Momonosuke seems like he's not going to use it, so maybe Zoro's finishing move for this fight has the word Tsunachi in it. Now, a lot of this stuff with Shimotsuki Kozaburo is stuff that we technically already knew, because Oda revealed it in the SBS section for volume 96. So a fan asks Oda, we have Shimotsuki Yasui, Shimotsuki Ryuma, Shimotsuki Kozaburo, Shimotsuki Onimaru. All of these people with the name Shimotsuki. Is there a connection to the Shimotsuki village that Zoro grew up in and his teacher Koshiro? Zoro said that he learned about the word Tsunachi from the old guy in his village. Plus, you said in the SBS of Volume 92 that they came to the East Blue from Wano. And so basically in the SBS for Volume 92 is where Oda gets asked about Minatomo. Why is there a Minatomo in the East Blue, and why is there a Minatomo now in Wano? And so Oda said that they're related to each other, that they're not actually the same person, but they do share a bloodline. And so that's kind of where Oda lets it slip that a few decades ago, a ship from Wano actually traveled to the East Blue. And then he goes on to say that one of the descendants of a person that was on that ship is actually a character that everybody knows. So I'm assuming that the descendant he's talking about is Zoro. And I'm assuming that the person that was aboard the ship was actually Zoro's mom. So the story of Shimotsuki Kozaburo goes like this. First, he forges Enma, he makes Enma, and hands it over to the Kozuki clan. So he gives it over to the Kozuki clan, and then 55 years ago, he leaves Wano. He sets out to sea. And he sets out to sea with a group of samurai and have a great adventure. And I'm assuming that this group of samurai are the pirates that the kid in this chapter is referring to when he says that Shimotsuki village was actually founded by pirates, right? Kozaburo then goes on to save some people from a group of bandits, and he teaches the people to use the sword to protect themselves. And he also falls in love. A little bit later, he decides to settle down and creates Shimotsuki village, and that's, where he has Koshiro, I'm guessing, because he fell in love, and then Koshiro later on goes on to have Kuina. So in other words, this chapter was brought to you by the SBS sections of Volume 92 and 96. Now, one of the new things that we do learn from this chapter is that Kozaburo used to be a pirate, right? So he left Wano and with a group of samurai, and those samurai were pirates, right? And you can be a samurai and a pirate. You could be both as well, just like Odin was. And we find that out because Zoro asks the old man, hey, people are saying that you used to be a samurai. And so Kozaburo tells Zoro to shut up, or the Marines are going to come in to invade the village. And so now I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, Kozaburo was being hunted, and maybe that's why he had to leave Wano. Because remember, the whole point of Wano being isolated was to keep it safe from a threat, aka the world government. So now I'm thinking that maybe there was a reason for why he left, and maybe it was because he wanted to, allow Wano to be safe, and that if he stayed in Wano, it would not be safe. So maybe the Marines and the government were already after him, and that's why he decided to leave Wano. And so I'm curious if this guy from the Gorosei has anything to do with why Kozaburo decided to leave Wano in the first place. But yeah, apparently there's a secret history there, a secret motive that pushed Kozaburo into hiding and kind of forced him to stop referring to himself as a samurai. So maybe that had something to do with him wanting to protect Zoro and his mom. Or maybe just him wanting to protect the people of Wano outside of Wano in general. So we get to meet Kozaburo in this chapter, and my first impression of him was that he looked a lot like Mont Blanc Cricket, but then the internet started pointing out that if you go to volume 92, there's an SBS section where Oda drew all three of Zoro's swords before he got Enma, and so he drew the Wado Ichimonji as a person, and so you can just tell that Wado Ichimonji looks a lot like a younger version of Kozaburo. And so this goes into what Kozaburo says a little bit later about how each sword has a personality. And so no matter how strong that personality is, it's a swordsman's job to tame that personality. And so we see that Kozaburo gives Zoro two katanas that he made. And these two swords plus the Wado Ichimonji are the three swords that Zoro essentially starts off the journey with. These two swords are the ones that we see him with in the beginning of the series. And then later, these two swords are the ones that are broken by Mihawk. And so Zoro makes the connection that the old man was indeed Kozaburo, and that he's the one who created Enma. And so Zoro realizes that the sword is testing him to see if he's worthy. And so he thinks about how Odin was able to use Enma normally, despite the sword requiring tremendous amounts of Haki to be used that way. And that leads us to the ending of the chapter, which pretty much confirms something that I think most of us already knew, which is that not only does Zoro have Conqueror's Haki, but he's also able to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki. And we found this out back in chapter 1010, because Oda was pretty much telling us back then that the only way to permanently injure Kaido is to be able to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki. And so the only difference between Zoro in this chapter and Zoro back in chapter 1010 is that now Zoro is aware of the fact that he can use both levels of Conqueror's Haki. Now what's interesting here is that in the manga, Oda has made a very deliberate effort to not show Zoro using King's Haki the normal way. Typically, when a user uses King's Haki, we get a close-up of their eye, and then we zoom out of it. And we don't get that with Zoro in the manga. We got it in the anime, right? Episode 984, which kind of spoiled the surprise for the upcoming adaptation of Chapter 1010. But in the manga, Oda has decided to show Zoro's use of Conqueror's Haki to be a little bit more subtle. And so I really like that, because stylistically, it really serves to differentiate him, or his use of Conqueror's Haki, from Luffy's use of Conqueror's Haki. It adds like a different flavor to it, or a different flair. And so I'm wondering if other Straw Hats awaken Conqueror's Haki, what their specific flair is going to be like. Or maybe it could be that Oda's saving the Conqueror's Haki eye shot for whenever it is that Zoro actually opens his other eye. Or whenever it is we find out what happened to his eye and why it's scarred. So we see him charging up his swords with Conquerors, and then we get a flashback of Luffy to when they first met, and he says, "The King of the Pirates will be needing no less than the world's greatest swordsman in his crew. So it's a good thing that that's your goal, Zoro." And so that just reminds us of the dynamic that Oda has, right? Because he loves Luffy so much, a good way to make Luffy look good, or look even better, is to have a bunch of Conqueror's Haki users in his crew. The more Conqueror's Haki users Luffy has in his crew, the better Luffy looks. And so it goes back to what Rouge said in Sabaody Archipelago when he first saw Zoro. Man, this guy doesn't seem like the type to take orders. So that alone says a lot about what type of person the captain must be. I mean, if you're a close reader of the series, there wasn't a whole lot of new information to extract from this chapter, if I'm being honest. But at the same time, it's also good just to have it there. You know, it's good to have it as a chapter as opposed to just text in an SBS. And then again, just the way that Oda handled the reveal of Zoro actually having Conqueror's Haki, I thought was really smart. Because, like, ever since the time skip, you know, we've been speculating that, yeah, Zoro is also going to have Conqueror's Haki. Why? Because we make the connection with the parallels between Roger and Luffy and Rayleigh and Zoro. Like, King even says to Zoro in the chapter, "So do you intend to be a king then?" So obviously the connection there with Dark King Rayleigh, male Rayleigh. So, you know, we kind of already knew that Zoro was going to get Conqueror's Haki. And I think Oda knew that we already knew that. And so that's why I think he decided to give us the reveal in a very unique way that fits Zoro. So it's not just like a Haki blast, right? He's actually tying the Conqueror's Haki into Zoro's priority, which is his swords, right? Which is also related to his expertise with armament Haki. So you get him charging his 3 blades there with Dark Lightning, which looks really good. And so I guess a follow-up question to this whole thing is, does King actually have Conqueror's Haki as well? I think he has it. I think it'd be kind of funny in a very like One Piece kind of way. In a very ironic way, I think it'd be hilarious if a guy named King doesn't have King's Haki. I mean, it would be funny once, right? Like you get the gag and it's revealed. And it's funny then, but then I think the gag would kind of wear out. Also, if it turns out that King has Conqueror's Haki, then there's kind of no point in him just having basic Conqueror's Haki, because at this stage in the game, you know, in a fight like this, basic Conqueror's Haki isn't going to do much for him. So I feel like if he does have Conqueror's Haki, he also has to have the advanced version of it. So yeah, I think he either has it and he's going to use advanced, or he just doesn't have it, which would be kind of weird. Now the last panel of this chapter is interesting because I read like a couple of translations that could point to different people. So in the official translation, Zoro says, "I've got a promise to keep to my captain and my best friend." So in this one, it seems like he's like essentially talking about Luffy, but in another translation, he said something like, "I have a promise to keep to my captain and my oldest friend." And so with that in mind, and given what this chapter is about, I think the meaning behind that translation was that he was talking about Luffy, and he was also talking about Kuina. So it's kind of cool how you can have a text apply to different people like that. However, I do think that he's referring to Luffy, like, and only Luffy, if we go from the official. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Thank you for all of your support. I really appreciate it. Again, I say this a lot, but I do because it takes a lot of time and work to come up with these videos and to think about, like, how do I make this interesting, right? How do I make it so that you're not just watching me tell you what happened in the chapter? It's like, how do I add value to this thing, you know? Because by the time the official translation comes out, the chapter has been out for like, what, 2 days? Like 3 days? So yeah, don't take it lightly when I say that I really do appreciate all of your support. because I really do mean it. So with that in mind, a connection that I made only after I read the official translation is what Kozaburo says. He says that swords are essentially made to kill people, right? And so when people say that a sword is cursed, that's like a badge of honor, because that means that the sword is doing its job. It's trying to kill. And so a little bit later, Zoro makes the connection. He says, if I keep exuding my Haki like this, at this level, it'll kill me. And then he suddenly gets this realization of like, oh wait, but that's perfect. It's perfect because the sword's job is to kill. That's the point. So I'm going to have to learn how to fight alongside this sword that is constantly trying to kill me. Because that's what the sword's job is. It's nothing personal, it's just fulfilling its purpose.
The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Porter. I think we can expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great.
That's what this chapter reminded me of with Kozaburo's and Ipponmatsu's words, that Zoro is thinking about. Zoro is destined for greatness. Thank you so much again. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.